Live Network. This is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here, coming to you live and direct on this Monday morning. And yes, I say live. After last week, I was on the anchor desk with Amy on vacation through the MorningLine hour. So we had some taped shows, but we're back now live. We're going to be talking about some key issues that I think a lot of people are paying close attention to, specifically some with regard to abortion, with regard to voting rights, with regard to law enforcement, the voucher law, and all of that. And a lot of it that's going to end up with what's being passed by the legislature in court and being legally challenged. And behind many of those legal challenges, okay, are members of the ACLU, okay, the American Civil Liberties Union. And we have an organization here headed up by Executive Director Hedy Weinberg, who joins us now live via Skype. There she is. Good morning to you, Executive Director of the ACLU. It's nice to see you.
You're doing well.
Well, it's good to have you on, and thanks for joining us. Haven't seen you in a while, and as always, though, I know even in this pandemic, the ACLU is very busy in keeping close tabs on a lot of things going on. I'm not sure where we should start here. I was touching on some of them, and we'll open up the phone lines later if anyone wants to jump in. But Hedy, why don't we start first with this vote by mail? And we can talk first maybe from the ACLU's perspective on why you think it is so important that this be an option for voters here in the state of Tennessee.
Sure. There's no question. I think all of us recognize that voting is really the cornerstone of our democracy in our country. And one's vote is one's voice. And we've long been committed to ensuring access to the ballot box, and really in this state and many others, fighting the voter suppression that we see happening all the time in terms of requirements for photo ID, restricting number of days that people can access early voting, recognizing that people are purged from voting lists. It just goes on. And right now, what's so key is the ability of individuals, eligible voters, to vote by mail so that they're not risking their life, risking their health to have to go to the polls. Now, ACLU has long believed that, going, walking, driving to the polls, it's one of the most patriotic things you can do in casting your vote. So we still believe polls should be open. But at the same time, there are many, many people who need to use mail ballots in order to exercise their franchise. And unfortunately, Tennessee is one of just a handful of states. Right now, I think just 4 states that are prohibiting use of absentee ballots. In normal, quote unquote, times, there are a number of states that actually always allow mail-in ballots. There have been, since the pandemic, about 16 or 17 states that restrict the use of absentee ballots just for folks who are over a certain age or out of the state or country or in hospital or with an illness where they can't leave. Those criteria have always been available to certain people, registered voters. But Tennessee now is only one of 4 who have not expanded access to the ballot box through mail ballots during the pandemic. So it's all about what's happening at this moment with the COVID-19 pandemic, and recognizing that as we've been asked, and that call is even getting louder, to shelter in, individuals want to protect their health, protect their safety. They might be living with people they're taking care of who are older, so that they're not of the voter of the age, which is 60, where you can use a mail-in ballot. So the requirements in Tennessee are so great that unfortunately we were not able to see our legislature expand the use, or what we say have no excuse mail-in ballots. So instead, with the legislature not choosing to expand the use of absentee ballots, the ACLU joined with others and went to court on behalf of the plaintiffs, our clients, and asked that the court expand the use of absentee ballots. And we were in state court, and Judge Lyle about 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago now, said that absentee ballots, the use of mail-in ballots, are acceptable and required by local election commissions in the state of the Secretary of State to ensure that all people can exercise their franchise.
And so as it stands now, it's a go, but you say there's still one final hurdle as the state is appealing to the state Supreme Court?
Sure. The state is still fighting the use of absentee ballots, expanded use of absentee ballots for registered voters. And they have chosen, not surprisingly, to appeal the decision, Judge Lau's decision. They asked for what's called an expedited hearing. So rather than go through the Circuit Court of Appeals, the case will now be heard by the Tennessee Supreme Court. But it's awaiting that hearing. And while the state tried to ask the Supreme Court to stay the decision to not allow people to use absentee ballots until the final decision was determined, the state Supreme Court said, no, right now, everyone who is a registered voter who's eligible to vote can, in fact, use an absentee ballot. So we're urging folks who want to exercise their franchise via mail-in ballot to, this is, the beginning of August 9th is the primary for Tennesseans across the state, for U.S. Senator, for many other races. And so we're asking folks, if they want to, go online and get their absentee ballot and then mail it in to their local election commission. That is the way one can exercise their vote. Or, of course, during early voting, which is about to start, they can go to the polls and certainly go August 9th. But this opportunity to use absentee ballots for all registered voters ensures that no one is risking their health, not only their health, but the health of individuals that might be living with them who are high risk.
Yeah, and so I imagine, Hedy, then, you're of the firm belief that without this option, there are going to be people out there that maybe would like to vote, but they know about the lines and the crowds that show up, especially during elections like this one, where there's going to be a good turnout, and they won't vote because of fear of the crowds and COVID-19.
Sure, there was no requirement or there was no exception that the legislature was making to ensure that individuals could use a mail-in ballot. Mm-hmm. The only thing available to eligible voters, if they did not meet this very strict list of criteria for when they could use mail-in ballots, was to go to the polls. And again, that is an option and it needs to be available to those who want to go to the polls. But as you just pointed out, Nick, individuals want to typically exercise their franchise, and that means finding an available option where they're not also risking their health. It's interesting. Tennessee has a very low voter turnout, and that in and of itself is a concern and something that organizations across the state, grassroots groups, statewide groups, are attempting to change. But you would think that our state would want to lift up the importance of voting and ensure that every registered voter not only had the ability to exercise their vote, but was energized and supported by the state. And it's disappointing that we've seen these barriers, continuing to see barriers put up by the state.
I'm wondering, and you're right, we're in unique times right now with the pandemic, and you make the point about how this could be important right now with people fearing getting sick. But after this pandemic passes and we move on and there's future elections, don't you think a strong argument could be made that, if this does go and it works and some of the arguments and claims that there would be fraud and the like are again proven to be false, that this should be status quo, whether there's a pandemic or not, and it enables more people to vote if you allow them to do so by mail?
Exactly. You make the point which is that hopefully this example of expanded use of absentee ballots will ensure the Secretary of State and others that this is how we should be able to conduct business in Tennessee as it relates to voting. The election reform, voting rights reform, is so automatic registration, where when people get their license or turn 18, they, can be placed on the voting rolls. We should ensure that we have same-day voting, which means same-day registration, which means that the day of the election or during early voting, if I'm not registered, I can go to the same place, register to vote, and then cast my ballot. These are not new ideas. And Tennessee is far behind when it comes to ensuring that individuals can cast their ballot. I think what's more important is to say we would be a stronger, perhaps even more unified community if individuals recognize that their voice counted. And again, their vote is their voice. And ACLU has been saying very loudly, and to as many people who will listen, is this particular election, your right to vote, or your vote, your rights depend on your vote. And so at this point, given that we're dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the very troubling times we're going through, both locally across the country, we need to make sure that everyone recognizes that their voice does count. And you do that through casting a ballot. And not everyone has the ability to cast a vote, obviously, if you're younger than 18. And what's more troubling, if in this state, if you've been convicted of a felony, even after you've served your time in prison, you have completed probation and parole, if you have court fines and fees, and actually, if you're not current in child support, Tennessee is the only state that requires you to be current in child support in order to exercise your right to vote if you have a felony conviction. We are so far behind in celebrating individuals' ability to use their voice and be part of the democracy that we hopefully want to see stand and enjoy for decades and centuries to come.
Listen, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have a few phone calls for you, and we'll also touch on some other issues right now that you guys are in the thick of, including Tennessee passing one of the most restrictive abortion bills in the country and where that stands legally. We'll take calls and more with Executive Director of the ACLU here in Middle Tennessee, Hedy Weinberg, right after this. Stay with us.